Dr. Ela Myrick watched the depth numbers tick past 10,000 meters, then 12. The drone Bathy 82 should have glided down to the trench floor, puffed a dusting of silt, and started its slow, meticulous lawnmower pattern. That was the plan. The Absol ROVs were built for punishment: titanium hulls, redundant thrusters, pressure-resistant optics the size of a child's fist. They did not simply fail. Telemetry jitter, said Naveen, hunched over his console. He was 22, full of caffeinated optimism and bad analogies, like it's trying to whisper through a thunderstorm. What thunderstorm? Ela asked. Naven shrugged, pointed to a smear of static marching across the sonar band. That one. On Ila's main display, the sonar fan bloomed and contracted, painting the trench interior in gradients of blue. The Mariana was a crease. On a tired planet, the fold where oceanic crust dove beneath continental. Deeper than the mountains were tall, it was. According to the Oceanic Research Authority's recent promotional series, The Last Mystery Owned by the Cradle of Humanity, the series had been an answer to a question no one asked out loud anymore. What could Earth possibly offer? Now that ships departed every week for colonies with air that didn't sting of salt and decline, the answer, apparently, was this: the Abyss. Bathy 82's telemetry went from jitter to nonsense. Depth read negative. Temperature spiked and dropped. The drone's camera set to low light. High sensitivity caught a smear of gray like an eyelid closing over a lens. Cut power, Ela said. Naveen did. Nothing changed. Ela tapped her throat. Mick. Bridge, this is subdeck. We just lost primary on Bathy 82. I need to abort descent. A voice came back, filtered and calm. Copy. Bringing her up. Except Bathy 82 didn't come up. It kept descending. According to the one instrument that hadn't quite lost its mind, the pressure gauge, it crept a little higher with each second, impossibly steady, as if the drone were gliding down a staircase. 17,200 meters, Naveen said softly. That's below the... There's no below, Ela said. Not for us, on the surface, aboard the Pelagia. Waves slapped the hull, wind rattled the sensor masts. The ship was a municipally refurbished research vessel, long and low, painted a hopeful white that never stayed white for long. The Oceanic Research Authority patchwave and trident peeled at the edges on every crew uniform. Funding had come in dribbles. Grants that required signatures from committees that themselves required grants to exist. They did the work anyway. It felt like resistance. Mark the location, Ela said, and don't file the auto report yet. Naveen gave her a worried look. You want me to hold back the loss report? I want 30 minutes. Ela said, just 30. We'll file, but I want to see why. He nodded, because he admired her too much not to. They sent Bathy 83 down at a slightly different angle, a second arm reaching for the same darkness. Wideband ping, Ela said. Let's see if the trench sings to us today. Naveen initiated the sequence. The ship trembled just a little as the low-frequency booms went out. Sound vanished into pressure and cold. It returned as a smear of color that built itself into geometry. At first it was typical trench texture: jagged walls, talus slopes of broken basalt, the soft, almost furry scatter of Absol muck. Then, farther out, the sonar drew a shape that didn't exist in the lexicon of geology. It was too smooth and too regular. A long arc with repeating ridges. The sort of thing a machine would build if it were trying to imitate bone, artifact. Naveen whispered, superstitious, like if he said it softly, the ocean wouldn't hear. Overlay satellite bathymetry from last cycle, Ela said. He did. The overlay misaligned by meters, tens of meters. Seafloor moved, Naveen offered. We had a microquake last week. Not this much, Ela narrowed her eyes, zoom. The arc became a hull, the ridges became plating. The sonar return had two clean edges, as though the ocean refused to fray it. Ela reached for the manual controls, nudged a gain slider, leaned forward. Her face, reflected faintly in the glass of the display, seemed older than 37. Hair in a practical knot, salt lines at the corners of her eyes. A habit of concentration that looked too close to worry. The trench HUMMED. It wasn't sound. In the air, it was the faintest vibration through steel and bone. A frequency you only heard if you found stillness inside your own breath. The crew quieted without being asked, on another channel. Someone laughed too loudly, pretending not to hear it. The hum rose and fell, not random. Not exactly. Record everything, Ela said. Raw formats. No compression, no filters, storages. Then delete the promo series. Naveen grinned despite himself and flushed the Pelagias. Media folder. The authority wouldn't notice, or if they did, they'd be grateful. Baffy 83 made it twice as far as its sibling before its compass spun. Its feeds filled with that same gray, like frost forming on the inside of glass. Ela killed every non-essential process. Forced the drone to dump packet-dense logs up the cable before the hum shuddered once, and the feed went black dot to drones gone in as many hours. Ela rubbed her temple and thought, someone is going to cut our lines. We're going to be told to go home and write a paper on anomalous acoustic events. The bridge door hissed open. Chief Rakish stepped in, wiping grease from his hands. He'd worked salvage before he worked science and had a salvager's suspicion that anything mysterious would eventually try to drown you. His beard was more salt than black now, and his laugh made the deck vibrate. You're pinging the world to death, he said. What are we listening for? Whales singing opera. Something's down there, Ela said. It pulled our drones off course. Rakish leaned over Naveen's shoulder, squinted at the frozen sonar frame. His eyes narrowed further. That's to clean, right? Ela said. What is it? I don't know, Ela admitted. The not knowing burned like a small fever. But if the trench has geometry, it's not geology. Rakish scratched his chin. We should go before it sees us the way your drones saw it. It already sees us, Ela said, and surprised even herself with the certainty. The call from the authority came after midnight. On the surface, the stars were reefs of light scattered across the black plate of sky on land. In cities that clung to coastlines out of habit more than profit, people slept and dreamed of other worlds. On the bridge, Ela took the call in the captain's chair because the captain snored in his cabin with an earplug. In strict orders to rest while they could. Director Pennington appeared in crisp hologram, hair shellacked into place, the authorities. Seal rotating gently over his shoulder as if to block out any dissent. Before it could form, Dr. Myrek, he said, you filed to loss reports in 12 hours. We lost connectivity, Ela said carefully. We haven't recovered the bodies. Bodies, he repeated, distaste curling the word. It worries me that you anthropomorphize machines. It worries me that you don't, Ela said. Because she had slept in fits for 3 days and Manners had ceased to offer any reward. Pennington blinked. Be that as it may, we have budget constraints. 2 drones cost more than a year of fuel. I trust you and your team will conclude operations and return to dock for debrief. No, Ela said. It slipped out. Other words scrambled to follow it, but the tone had done the damage. No. Pennington's eyebrows climbed. That's not a. We're on the edge of a discovery, Ela said, forcing her voice into a steadier shape. We have sonar, returns of regular structures in the trench. We have an unknown acoustic source, narrowband. 2 separate drones were dragged off course by a force we didn't apply. Something is down there. If we retreat now, someone else will come back later. With a warship instead of a research license, Pennington's expression shifted at the word warship. He glanced aside, as if listening to a second channel. His voice, when it returned, had softened. Another team has reported similar losses in the Aleutian Basin, and a private outfit filed a sealed brief from the Mozambique Channel. This isn't isolated. Isla's mouth went dry. How many? Enough that the council will notice by morning. Pennington said, which is why, Dr. Myrek, I need you to do one thing. 1. Give me a picture. He leaned forward, authority fist-wrapped. In urgency. Give me something that, when the colonists and the corporates and the Imperials come sniffing, I can hold up and say, this is science. This was ours. Then authorize a 3rd drone, Ela said. And give me live relay satellites. If we push data up through the net, we won't lose it if something cuts our cable. Pennington hesitated. The budget, bill me, Ela said, and smiled because she could not help herself. Put it on my student loans. Pennington snorted. In spite of himself, a human sound cracking the veneer. Fine. One more drone. And you keep open comms. If you go dark, I cut your power from orbit. Do we understand each other? We understand each other, Ela said. She killed the call before she could say thank you. Rakesh whistled low. You're either going to win prizes, doctor, or be banished to teaching undergraduates to identify. Barnacles. I like barnacles, Ela said. They know what they are. They launched Bathy 91 at dawn. The ocean was almost calm, a patient animal hiding teeth. Redundant everything, Ela said as they checked systems. Triple encryption, independent pressure sensors, gyros cross-checked with fiber optic laser, arrays, and set the sonar to step frequencies. If there's an active blocker, we might hop over it. Naveen made a face. In case the abyss is jamming us on purpose. In case, Ela agreed. At 4,000 meters, they picked up the hum again. At 6,000 to 100, it pulsed. 3 beats, pause, 3 beats. Naveen began stripping it into components, ran it through filters, spat it into ugly graphs that crawled across 3 separate screens. It's not random, he said. Look, the peaks were too regular. The rhythm shifted, then shifted back. She had the irrational sensation of being watched. A hand hover over her shoulder as she reached to type. Ping, Ela said. Already did, Naveen said. No. Reply. I wasn't asking for one. She said that the trench opened on the display like a mouth. Bathy 91's lights carved cones through pale silt storms. Something long and pale wriggled away by a luminescent, eel or worm. The underworld always reminded Ela of space, which was funny, given that people left Earth for the latter because it was less hostile. At 9,800 meters, the sonar return sharpened. A line curved across the display, then a parallel line, then ribs. Between, again, Ela murmured. She barely realized she'd said it aloud. Naveen's hand hovered over the gain, but he didn't touch it. They watched the image cohere. The structure was enormous. It lay on its side, half swallowed by silt and time. It looked like a ship if a ship were a city, if a city were a preying animal. Hold depth, Ela said, voice gone tiny, far away. Sweep right. Slow. They did. The ribs resolved into repeating modules, each the size of the Pelagia. Lines ran from them like nerves. Ports notches pimpled the hull in a pattern that whispered efficiency and intent. Ela had spent her life reading the secret letters oceans wrote on stone. This was a different alphabet. This was a declaration. Tag coordinates, she said. Naveen's fingers flew. Tagging, recording. Backing up to local and to the bird. The bird was the Relayan Ancient, rented satellite in high orbit, whose primary function was to stream entertainment back to those who needed old Earth music to sleep. Someone would be irritated with them later. Later could take a number. At 11,000 meters. The hum changed. It was no longer a hum, but a note with shape. It came through the hull, through their teeth. On the screen, the sonar image tore in half and rewrote itself. The ship, if ship it was, did not just lie there. It turned toward them. Video. Ela said, because the voice inside her had buried fear beneath a stack of tasks. They switched feeds. The camera showed silt and darkness, then hedge. Metal that did not corrode the way human metal corroded. A skin whose polished time had not dulled. Ela found herself touching the screen, like touch could confirm what eyes already knew. Is that writing? Naveen asked. Along the edge, shallow grooves carved symbols, not letters, not numerals, something more like music written as geometry. Ila's mind tried and failed to hook it to any of the languages she knew earthbound or off-world. The hum pulled itself into intervals. 3 long, 2 short, 3 short. It wasn't Morse. That was an old romance she had indulged in graduate school, while falling in love with a radio operator. But it was a pattern older than either of them could claim, a logic that made the hair on her arms rise. Back us out, Ela said. Slow and steady, don't turn your back on it. Drones don't have backs, Naveen said, because he was young and fear came to him first as jokes. He complied anyway. The Bathy 91 edged up and away, dragging its cable through the water like a quivering umbilical. The note followed. The ceramic fibers of the relay cable sang faintly against the deck spools. Hila imagined the tone traveling all the way to the relay, and then spilling into the net. Someone, somewhere, would be listening to a forgotten ballad and hear, underneath, the trench singing its own song. When Bathy 91 cleared 14,000 meters, the hum eased. The sonar return softened, not vanishing so much as deciding not to be seen. Hila let breath go. Her palms stung where her nails had dug into them. "Okay," she said. "Okay, we have the birds down," Naveen said. "What? The relay just cut. It's offline." He swallowed. "We were pushing live. It went dead when the tone peaked. Local backup." Hila's voice didn't shake, but it felt like it might. "Local is fine," he said. "We've got it twice, on the solid state, on the wet drives." He tapped 3 bright green lights, like they were talismans. "Secure everything," Hila said. "Isolate the network from the comms." Her display flashed blue-white, then black. A second later it revived, font and icons misaligned, applications stacked like fallen cards. The sonar frame white balanced itself into a flat gray. "EMP," Rakesh barked from the doorway. "Already moving. We take a hit. We're fine," Naveen said automatically, which meant nothing. "Power levels nominal," Rakesh said, reading the engineer's panel. "No spike." Hila tapped commands into the console with muscles that felt like they belonged to someone else. The raw files were where they should have been. The copies were gone. Not wiped, no message about corrupted files, no empty folders, but as if the partitions that held them had never existed. On Hila's wrist, her personal slate buzzed. A message: "Stay on analog, no sender." No trace in the log when she checked. "Did you?" she began. Naveen shook his head. Director Pennington's face flickered into being again without a chime. "You have one image," he said. And Hila knew before he spoke the rest that he had already seen more than he should. "One. And then you shut down your comms." "Good. Stay that way. Someone's listening." "Who?" Hila asked. "Pennington." Swallowed. He had aged an hour in the 20 minutes since their last call. "I have 13 requests for data from 13 governments that have never sent me so much as a holiday card. I have a private militia ship changing course toward your coordinates. I have a message in a very old cipher that references a program I don't have clearance to know exists, Dr. Myrick. I don't have time to be scared the way I would like to be. So listen, you're going to take what you have and copy it to tape." "Tape," Naveen said, as if Pennington had suggested clay tablet. "Tape," Pennington said, jaw set. "Because I think the thing you pinged can eat anything that speaks in ones and zeros, and I do not want to defeat it. Then you're going to get somewhere. That isn't the Mariana Trench." Hila felt the ocean under them like a patient heart. She looked at the sonar and saw the shape of a hull that had not rusted. She thought of the hum that wasn't a hum, but a message. She thought of a million ships rising out of the deep, like a flock taking flight. The idea was so absurd she almost said it aloud to exorcise it. Instead she said, "Chief, how long to spin up the analog recorder?" Rakesh grinned, delighted for the first time in days. "I never throw anything away," he said, and slapped the bulkhead as if it were an old friend. 10 minutes. Pennington's hologram leaned close. "And doctor, don't try to own this, survive it. Let's be very clever and very small until we understand what's awake." His image vanished. Bathy 91 hovered at 12,000 meters. A steel moon orbiting a buried planet. The hum returned, softer now. Hila imagined it as a hand pressed to the door, feeling for warmth on the other side. She had spent her career listening for the slow stories of water and stone. This was not slow. This was not stone. "Bring her up," she said softly. The drone rose. The hum followed for a while. Then it faded, on the deck, as dawn broke and turned the sea the color of quicksilver. Chief Rakesh hauled out a dust-coated box the size of a trunk. "Signal Corp Model K77, he announced proudly. "Analog 2 magnetic. Found her in a shipbreaker's yard in Koki and couldn't bear to watch her die. Thought maybe I was being sentimental. Guess not. They wired, patched, adapted, swore. The hum didn't return, but it didn't matter. They had what they had." Hila spooled a copy of the raw sonar onto tape. Label written in her own neat hand, "Mariana, 91, Structure Alpha." When it was done, She stood alone at the stern and let the wind pick sweat and salt from her skin. Far under her feet, something waited, patient beyond the scale of human patience. Round her, the Pelagia creaked and shifted and pretended to be ordinary. Naveen joined her, holding 2 mugs of coffee that tasted faintly of metal. He handed her one, then stared at the line where sky pretended to meet water. "Do you think it's ours?" he asked. "Ours," Ela repeated. "Human," he said. "Ancient, lost. Like the old stories. A hidden fleet. I don't know. A contingency." Ela held the cup between her palms. Let the heat tell her that at least here, at least now. "She had a body, I think," she said finally, "that for the first time in a long time. Earth has a secret, good secret or bad." "Yes," she said, and sipped coffee that had gone cold. Behind them, the tape reels turned, magnetizing particles in patterns that meant ship, hull, ribs, breath. The ocean kept its counsel for the moment, and somewhere in the black distance beyond the horizon, other ships changed course and other governments leaned closer to their screens, and no one yet had the imagination necessary to be appropriately afraid. On the bridge, the Pelagia's motion felt wrong to Springy, as if the whole Pacific had slackened the line. Chief Rakish glanced at the inclinometer and swore under his breath. Barometer dropped. He said, "No weather to blame. Thermoclines, walking," Naveen added. Eyes on his water column model. "It shouldn't do that." Ela stepped to the forward glass. Dawn had come up clean. Pewter water. Low cloud. Then the sea took a single, long breath the size of a continent. It didn't break or crest. It rose. The horizon bulged, a subtle arc you felt in your stomach before your eyes caught up. The hum returned. Not from the trench directly below, but from everywhere at once. It threaded through the hull, through the fillings in their teeth, through the slack in their thoughts. On the aft deck, the Signal Corp K-77 ticked as if relieved that the world had chosen a language it understood. "Secure the drone," Ela said. Now, Bathy 91 was still at 9,000 meters, ascending under power. Cable whirring through the deck guides. Rakish hit the winch boost. The motor complained. Somewhere below, ceramic fibers tightened into a single bright line between a small machine and a small ship, and the Pacific made clear it did not care. "Traffic," Naveen said, pointing to blips had appeared on the surface radar, closing fast from the south. The closer of the pair answered hails with a clipped reply that identified it as Cutter Melville. Authority-chartered patrol boat with a hull like a blunt knife. The second did not answer at all. "Private militia outfit," Rakish said, reading the silhouette. "Magneto harpoon on the bow. They're here for souvenirs. Keep us between them and the cable." Ela said that the hum stepped up a fraction. It found new harmonics, a scaffolding for meaning that refused to resolve. The Pelagia's deck plates trembled. A pot slid an inch, then another. Somewhere forward, a wrench clinked its way off a bench and rang on steel like a bell. "Director, Pennington is back," Naveen muttered. Pennington's single quotes as miniature hologram flared over the comms panel. "Blue light fighting sunrise. The council has declared an oceanic exclusion. You're the center. Every boat out of jurisdiction is being told to clear 10,000 kilometers. The privateer didn't get your memo," Rakish said. "They're on a different payroll." Pennington said tightly, "I've asked for a Navy corvette. It will not arrive before things get worse." "How much worse?" Ela asked. Pennington's eyes flicked aside, unfocused as if reading lines of fire. "Psych events in every basin. Deep scattering layer rising to 100 meters and under a minute whole ecosystem spooked. The Aleutian team reports a..." He stopped. "Hold a moment." Naveen, who had been watching the surface as much as the screen, spoke without turning. "What is that?" At first it looked like a distant fog bank acquiring edges, a bruise on the horizon darkening instead of thinning as the sun rose. Then the edge became an outline, and the outline grew details your brain argued with. Something enormous was lifting out of the water. "Range?" Ela asked. 56 nautical miles. Naveen said, "and closing only because it's growing." They watched it with binoculars until the magnification failed to keep up with their disbelief. It came up with patience, shedding centuries of silt and water like old skin. The sea peeled away in sheets that shattered into spray. Every line of it was wrong for a natural thing, and to right for a built one. Its hull curved with a mathematician's kindness. Along its flank, plates nested like scales, each with minute seams that made engineers curse softly in admiration. 10 kilometers minimum, Rakish said. Keel to crown. Nothing has that displacement, Ela said, not as a correction but as a small prayer that the world she knew had rules. It isn't displaced, Naveen said. It's ignoring. They were too far to hear the surface noise, but the low-frequency component rolled on ahead. It rattled fixtures on shore. The wave would arrive as a tide that forgot the calendar and came all at once. In cities built to look at their own reflections in the ocean, alarms would bleat and then go dumb under load. The private militia ship broke its silence to broadcast a salvage claim in 5 languages and an older legal code. It fired its harpoon showy, a grappler meant for rhetoric instead of physics, and the line arched uselessly, drooping into the wake. The rising hull did not notice. Then the second wake began. Southwest, Naveen said, and northeast, and everywhere. He wasn't wrong. The world's basins began to boil in orderly ways. Off Cuba, fishermen filmed a metal mountain shedding barnacled water like glass beads, swearing in voices that would break before sunset. In the Mozambique Channel, a cargo carrier found itself dwarfed and then shadowed. Its crew too stunned to run and too small to be crushed on purpose. Near the Aleutians, the research team Ela had never met called in one panicked phrase, "It's a city." It's not a ship, it's a city, and then spent 12 minutes sobbing into a live feed 2000s off the coast of Chile. A kelp forest tore free of its anchors and rose with a sound like silk ripping, dragged by something indifferent to habitable substrate. Naveen, Ela said, "Start a count." He started, because numbers were a spell anyone could learn. He marked them not by the toys of the authority, but by the signatures of their wakes, the spectral smears satellites made when they tried to decide what to show. He counted until the counter lost scansion and became an accusation thousands, then tens of thousands. Somewhere in the off-world news mesh, an anchor used the word million and was not laughed off. The screen, Bathy 91, Rakish reminded them. The winch clanked. The cable hissed through guides with a note that scraped at the back of teeth. The drone broke surface on a wave that wanted to unmake the ship. Rakish and a deckhand in harness hauled it in, wet and shuddering, and slotted it into its cradle. The drone was pitted with fine silver dust that wasn't salt. "Don't touch your face," Rakish said. Masks, Ela watched the horizon. The first Leviathan had leveled off. It did not move toward land or toward them. It did not do anything that looked like tactically aggressive behavior. It simply turned, a slow axial roll that admitted sunlight to seams. You didn't want to see, and pointed its nose at the sky. "Is it flying?" Naveen asked, because questions were all he had. "It has stopped being in the water," Ela said, "which is a kind of flight." She tapped the comms, found Pennington's channel still open. "Director, you're seeing this. I'm seeing this," he said, voice to comm. Behind him, the holographic wash of the council chamber flickered. People moved in a purposeful panic that civilized bodies make when the old plan is dead, and the new plan isn't born yet. I'm also seeing an interstellar relay jam that isn't ours, and I'm seeing ships in low orbit being told to make room. "By whom?" Ela asked. Pennington's expression did a strange thing: amusement, maybe, or awe. "By the same system that just told the Drax and Imperium's picket line to stand down in a language they haven't spoken since they were apes with steel. That ship is not broadcasting with radio." Naveen nudged Ela, eyes wide. He had a short-range, analog receiver in his hands, plugged into the K-77's output. The old machine's needles danced politely, as if attending a party, under the hum. There was a structure, not words, not for them, but definite repetition, definite intention. "Record it," Ela said. "We are," he said, "and does something else you should see." He switched one of the bridge screens to a satellite feed the authority didn't pay for, and had been using for years. It showed Earth's day side gleaming, then a shadow crawling across the Pacific. That wasn't weather. The first ship had cleared cloud level. It left a hole in the sky where it pushed air aside, The hull traveled. Secondaries, Rakish said. There's a pattern. There was. The ships of ships they rose along fault lines and old cold currents. Old superhighways of earth and water. The trenches emptied first, Mariana, Tonga, Kermadec, Puerto Rico. Then the mid-ocean ridges spoke, and a line of humped backs arched where new seafloor was born. As each rose, the hum varied, notes in a scale Ela had never been taught from orbit. A net of glints began to lace Earth, moving to precisely to be debris. The global satellite arrays, human, corporate, and otherwise, hiccuped as the near space around the planet acquired new neighbors that ignored debt and orbit slots. Local radios gone, the cutter Melville reported. We're down to line of sight and hand signals. The privateer announced it would conduct a controlled boarding of the Pelagia to secure evidence. It didn't get the chance. The first of the rising ships didn't threaten or fire. It inhaled. The privateer's engines coughed once, twice, as if embarrassed, and died. Its lights went out. Its harpoon line went slack. It drifted, inadvertently harmless. The Pelagia's lights flickered, fought, and stabilized. Rakish patted the analog recorder as if it were responsible, staying small. He reminded no one and everyone. Staying clever. Isla's slate buzzed on her wrist again. Another unsigned message. Do not attempt handshake. She hadn't intended to. She had imagined it because who wouldn't, but she hadn't intended to. Now she took her hands off every control at once. As if the slate could see her and judge. Dr. Myrick, Pennington said. The council is elevating to contact protocol. That's for aliens, Rakish said. Startled into laughter that stuck in his throat. Pennington heard him. Define alien at your leisure, Chief. The Vayari Collective has requested that we secure any technology. The Draxan Imperium has politely asked us to destroy it. The Arcology Guild says we should evacuate coastal megastructures, but their simulation budgets were cut last year, so they can't make the case compellingly. Enough to move build-out schedules. And you, Ela asked. Pennington's gaze sharpened. I want you to stay alive and send me anything that matters. Via tape if you have to put it in a bottle and throw it at an authority buoy. There are going to be a lot of loud people very shortly. Already are, Naveen said. Tapping to a channel where 100,000 private citizens were trying to share a single breath. The feed alternated between a tourist pointing at a wall of metal and saying "oh" on a loop, a child's drawing of a whale and a robot holding hands, and a graph that said something about tide gauges, and then vanished under moderation. The first ship cleared atmosphere. For a moment it was a second moon, wrong in color and intent. The sky round it bruised with electromagnetic bruises. A curtain of aurora tried to hang in daylight, failed and sulked. Trajectories. Ela said. Naveen had them. He overlaid vector fields on the globe. The ships rose to a shell well beyond the orbital lanes. A sparse sphere. They were not building a wall. They were drawing a diagram too large to read from the surface. Behind them, beneath them, the oceans filled. Their wounds. You could almost pretend there had never been gaps. Except the tide had come in everywhere and refused to leave. And the reefs lay stunned at unfamiliar depths. And the whales had started to sing songs no one had taught them. Phones are out. In Manila, Rakish reported. Sydney reports lights, moving under the harbor. Then not. Somebody in Valparaiso says their grandmother remembers a story. Save the grandmother, Ela said. They did. Naveen started a folder called Oral. He shoved into it everything that felt like a thread. A fisherman's lie. A grandmother's myth. A child's insistence that the hum was counting. Science was. Among other things, an organized faith in the voices you heard when you were careful enough. And us, the captain newly awake. Hair smashed flat on one side asked, stepping onto his own bridge and looking like an intruder. Do we run for port or stand by this event? Ela opened her mouth, closed it. She looked at the horizon, where 3 more backs had become shoulders, and then spines, and then ships. She felt smaller than she had when she'd first seen. The trench outline hardened into ribs. She felt a thought knocking from the other side of her skull. Neither, she said. We move to deep water outside anyone's jurisdiction, and we listen. The first people who try to take this will do it by taking us. Let's be very uninteresting. Uninteresting it is, the captain said, relieved to have orders. He spun the wheel because he was old-fashioned and because it felt like doing something large with his hands could make the world smaller. They made 10 knots into a sea that no longer believed in knots. The cutter Melville fell into escort station without being asked. The privateer drifted, someone on her bow now waving a flag, because old tools work when the new ones don't. Off-world channels, Pennington said, mostly to himself. The Draxon recall is confirmed. They're bringing their border patrols home. The Veari have gone to observational posture, which is their way of saying they're terrified. Ela pressed her palm flat to the glass. It was cool on the skin, warm under the sun. She remembered her sister's last message from an oxygen farm on Tau Cygni B. It's quiet here. The quiet is wide. I think you'd like it. And she thought, I like the loud dot. The hum softened again, not gone, transformed. It settled into a pattern that her bones started to half expect. The K-77's needles eased, like a chest deciding its new resting breath. The satellites started to come back one by one in a technicolor stutter. The Webry filled with opinions. Count? She asked. And AVEN showed her the number. It was safely past the line where human mouths rounded and refused to make more syllables. Without metaphor, he had added a note. Stopped counting. Good, she said. We weren't going to use them all in a sentence anyway. They reached the edge of one jurisdiction and did not enter another. The captain set the engines to a thrifty lope. Rakish taped the tapes into a weatherproof cylinder and lashed it under a bench with old rope, then lashed the bench to the deck. You don't keep heirlooms on a shelf in a storm. By late afternoon, the first shell of ships glittered overhead, too far to cast more than a moving thought of shade. The second shell assembled with less haste. If the first had been panic or drill, this was method. Patterned lines, anchors in the empty. The aliens spoke first, not their governments, their people. A Veari pilot in a junkie courier ship pirated a channel and pointed her cockpit at Earth and said, in a human language from centuries ago, we see you. A Draxon border guard sent a single emoji that, to Draxons, meant both respect and I will not pretend to not be afraid. An arcology collective posted a plan for raising all coastal elevators by one story with parts at hand. Humans answered with the only thing they had in comparable number, jokes. Someone drew eyes on a photo of the rising hull and gave it a speech bubble that said, sorry I'm late. The lightness did not hold. You can't joke about a new sky for long. At blue hour, with the air like a bruise again and lights along the empty horizon switching on in agreements and refusals, Ela took a call from Pennington she hadn't expected. Doctor, he said, voice rough, there's a council seat with your name penciled in. Don't take it. They want to put a scientist on the days to make their certainty look earned. And we don't have certainty. A heroic non-compliance, she said. I would call it a Tuesday, he said. Then, quietly, I got a file, not supposed to exist. A program name I was told to forget. It says this might not be the first time Earth has worn a halo. Ela felt the hum through the soles of her feet. She thought of the grooves on the hull. Writing that wasn't for them. She thought of a fleet that rose like a refill on a prescription. Then someone remembered, she said. Or something did, Pennington said. He hesitated. Sleep if you can. This is the last day the world will look like the world. He cut the line before she could tell him it already didn't. Night fell in choppy increments, broken by skyfire in bands that had no business at that latitude. The Pelagia drifted with purpose. The analog recorder whispered on. Far below, where pressure turned careless steel to confetti, the trenches were emptier. Not empty, just less crowded with secrets. On deck, Naveen leaned on the rail and tried to make his jaw stop clenching. What do you think they want? He asked. They haven't wanted us. Ela said. Yet. He nodded and was not comforted. I keep thinking of Bathy 82 and 83. Like they swatted gnats. They moved our hands away from their face, she said. That's courtesy. A line of light crossed the sky, one of the new ships climbing to take its place. It blinked once as it passed an optical artifact, a lens flare, and unmapped. Hello, the hum shivered in response. Count how many trenches have stopped singing. Ela said finally. Why? Because when they all stop, she said. Whatever this is has finished step one. He started counting again, because sometimes The spell still helps. By midnight, the last great back had broken the surface. By 2, the ocean had calmed in the ugly way of seas after upheaval empty of chop, heavy as lead. By 4, there were more objects between Earth and the sun than there had ever been, and none was in a place they were supposed to be. At dawn, the fleet's shadow passed, thin and diffuse, turning the world from blue to a different blue for a breath. No one fired. No one died because of malice. A few did because of physics, and the grief that followed felt indecently small against the scope of the day. Ela stood where she had stood when it began and did not try to find a shape big enough. She said, mostly to the recorder, "We observed emergence. We observed non-hostile postures. We observed assembly." She did not say we woke it. She did not say it woke itself. Those were chapter titles, not data. Behind her, on the bench lashed to the deck, the tape reels turned, magnetizing their quiet proof. Overhead, a million ships took their places. The galaxy noticed, and Earth, for the first time in a long time, was no one's backwater at all. Every channel screamed with conjecture. Governments quarreled in public, fleets scrambled in orbit. Cults declared themselves vindicated. Children posted drawings of whales teaching ships to sing. But aboard the weathered research vessel, all that reached them were fragments carried over narrow analog lines and grainy satellite rebounds. The rest of the world, Ela decided, could chatter itself hoarse. Here, the work remained. The work was history. 1. The vault in Genovate began with a file. Director Pennington had promised Ela something unsanctioned, and 2 days later he delivered. The transmission wasn't digital in any modern sense. It arrived as a scan of paper, photographed badly, as though someone had pointed a cheap lens at a locked archive and hoped no one would ask. The header read, Celestial Arc Program Termination Report. Much of it was blacked out in the thick ink of mid-22nd century censorship. What remained spoke of refuge architecture and distributed storage. Phrases recurred: fleet in reserve, genetic continuity, failsafe signal, failsafe. Naveen repeated, squinting, like an alarm clock or a fire alarm. Ela said. She traced a finger over one of the diagrams, fuzzy with age. It showed not ships, not exactly, but something between cathedral and engine, drawn in lines that trembled like they'd been copied too many times. Around it, a notation, Chalari origin presumed. That word anchored itself in her mind, Chalari. She'd heard it once, years ago, in a late-night argument at a xenolinguistics conference. A mythic civilization, erased so thoroughly from the historical record that only whispers and half-forbidden footnotes remained. Supposedly, they'd burned across the stars tens of thousands of years before, long before humanity climbed out of its gravity well. Supposedly, they'd died in a war that left scars no telescope could quite explain. But what if they hadn't died completely? What if they had hidden? 2. The message in the hull Rakesh insisted they return to the trench, though every other authority screamed for evacuation. You don't walk away from a crime scene when the body's still warm, he said. Eyes bright behind sleepless lids. So they returned, Bathy 91 descending once more into blackness. This time they didn't probe too close. They skirted the edges where sonar still traced ribs against water. The grooves along the hull, the ones Ela had thought might be writing, resolved under new filters. Naveen overlaid the patterns on linguistic maps, Sumerian cuneiform, Mayan glyphs, orbital markers from Vayari trade code. None matched, but when he ran the sequence as if it were music intervals instead of letters, the pattern leapt. Alive wits. A scale, he said, voice shaking. It's notation. They fed the tone into the signal corp recorder. Slow, cautious, the way a monk might handle a relic. The ship hummed back, not random this time. A deliberate chord, resonant enough to make steel screws loosen in their housings. That's recognition, Ela whispered. It's answering itself. The hull was not just a relic, it was a score. A memory carved into metal, waiting for someone or something to play it again. 3 alien reactions. Be the 5th day. The galaxy could no longer pretend to look away. The Vayari ambassador broadcast a statement filled with grief-tinged reverence. The Chalari were our teachers, our shadows, our judges. If their fleet rises again, then the trial they fled may follow. The The Draxan Imperium reacted with panic disguised as fury. They accused Earth of harboring a weapon in violation of every treaty. 3 battle groups warped to Sol, only to find their engines fail within sight of the new orbital shell. The million ships hadn't fired. They had simply looked, and the Draxan drives sputtered into stillness like embarrassed hearts, even human. Colonies fractured. Mars wanted custody of the fleet. Luna argued for dismantling. The Pacifican Alliance proposed worship. None of them could explain why the ships remained silent, orbiting like sentinels who had not yet chosen a master. And still the hum continued, sometimes soft, sometimes sharp, a rhythm no one yet translated. 4. Myths made flesh that night. On the aft deck, Ela and Rakish shared coffee that tasted of rust and salt. Above them the sky glittered wrong stars blurred by silhouettes that had never been charted. My grandmother used to tell a story, Rakish said quietly, of gods who hid in the sea when the sky was on fire. Said one day they'd wake when the world needed them. I thought it was just another fisherman's myth. But now, he trailed off, gesturing at the unnatural heavens, not gods. Ela said, just survivors. Survivors who prepared to well. He chuckled. And what do survivors want, Doctor? She looked down at the tape reels, still turning in their box, capturing the hum, to warn us, or to finish what killed them. 5. The darkness beyond on the 7th day. The fleet finally spoke in a voice too large to ignore. It wasn't sound, not even electromagnetic broadcast. It was presence of pressure inside every mind connected to a receiver, a whisper on the edge of thought. Naveen dropped his coffee and clutched his temples. Rakish cursed, half in prayer. Ela felt her heart hitch, then steady, as if her pulse had been folded into a larger rhythm. The words were simple, universal, translated into every tongue at once. We are the Chalari. We come not to conquer, we come to prepare. The darkness follows, then silence. 6. The Council divided in Geneva. The United Earth Council fractured along predictable lines. Half demanded alliance with the Chalari fleet. Half argued it should be destroyed before its darkness arrived. Dr. Ela Myrick was summoned to testify. She refused. I'm not a politician, she told Pennington. I'm a witness, and the ocean hasn't finished speaking yet. Pennington only sighed, then hoped the ocean knows how to vote. 7. What lurks beyond that evening, as the Pelagia drifted under the weight of the stars? Ela stared up at the artificial halo and wondered what kind of war had been so terrible that an entire civilization buried 1 million ships on a single backwater world. And worse, what kind of enemy could frighten them into such silence for millennia? The hum deepened, slow and patient, as though answering. Somewhere, far beyond Sol, the deep space listening posts began reporting faint anomalies, blurs of motion in the void. Unregistered shadows crawling toward the light. The Chalari fleet had not risen for humanity. It had risen for its own unfinished war, and now, whether Earth wished it or not, the galaxy would stand in its path. The sea had fallen eerily calm after the awakening. For days, the Pelagia drifted between continents while the sky above grew stranger each night. The artificial constellation of the Chalari fleet burning where no human chart placed stars. The ocean lapped the hull with soft, deceptive rhythm, as if nothing had changed. But nothing was the same. The Council in Geneva had declared an emergency summit. Delegates screamed across languages and time zones, debating who might control or destroy the 1 million ship halo in orbit. Human satellites blinked out one by one, not blasted but gently pushed aside, as though swept from a table before a feast. And in deep space, listening posts continued to report motion, shadows that swallowed light. It was into this storm that Dr. Ela Myrick was pulled. 1. The Council's off-Earth council chamber was a cathedral of glass and light perched above the drowned bones of old Geneva. Ela appeared by relay, her image projected between delegates who smelled blood and opportunity. Dr. Myrick intoned Chairwoman Soldad, you are the first human to make contact with the Chalari fleet. We require your assessment. Can humanity command these vessels? No, Ela said simply. Murmurs erupted. Some shouted protest. Others smiled thinly, pleased by the honesty. You've observed them, pressed the Martian delegate. red dust still clinging to his boots like pride. Surely they can be interfaced with. Every system can. Give us the access key. They don't have a key, Ela said. She looked each delegate in the eye. Or their projections where eyes would be. These ships respond to something older. They woke because something signaled them. They are not waiting for us. They are preparing for what comes after us. The chamber hissed with anger. The Luna block accused her of defeatism. The Pacificans demanded the fleet be placed under shared command. The Arcology Guild proposed worship again, veiled as integration of cultural rituals. Then the Draxan emissary broke protocol and cut in on an open channel. His reptilian, jaw framed by military braid. Destroy them, he growled, before they finished their pattern. The Chilari died for a reason. Do not invite their predators here, a Veari voice answered, trembling with reverence. Destroy the Chilari. They were our first teachers. To strike them is sacrilege. The chamber collapsed into chaos. Isla's transmission flickered. She caught Pennington's tired face in the background, his lips shaping words without sound. Stay alive. 2. The choice at Seaback on the Pelagia. Ela found Rakish and Naveen on the deck. Staring upward, the fleet had arranged itself into concentric shells, points of light shimmering against the black. The pattern was deliberate, now symmetry too exact for chance. They're building a shield, Naveen murmured, or a cage, Rakish countered. The analog recorder ticked faintly beside them. Within its magnetic memory lay hours of tones, chords, pulses, patterns no human had yet unraveled. They're waiting for a decision, Ela said. Rakish frowned. Ours? She shook her head. There's still, humanity had a choice, reach for the fleet and risk awakening power they didn't understand, or destroy what they could before it finished assembling. Neither option promised survival. 3. The fleet speaks. The answer came at dusk. The hum deepened until the Pelagia's bulkhead sang like a struck bell. Above, the ships shifted formation, aligning until they cast a faint net of shadow across the ocean surface. Then the voice came again, not through speakers, not through comms, but directly into every mind that listened. We are the Chilari. We built this refuge in your seas to sleep until the darkness rose again. That hour is here. Images followed, impossible, overwhelming. Ela staggered as visions filled her skull. Star systems collapsing under waves of black fire. Planets stripped bare, fleets like oceans torn apart by something vast and invisible. The enemy had no face, no body, only absence, consumption given motion. The voice continued. We do not seek your command. We ask your choice. Join us in the defense, or remain behind when the tide comes. The darkness devours all. Then silence, broken only by the slap of water against the hull. 4. The Argumenti argued until their throats bled. Naveen wanted to broadcast acceptance. It's the only hope. With them, maybe humanity survives. Rakish spat into the sea. Or maybe we get marched into someone else's war. A war we can't even understand. You saw those visions. That wasn't battle. It was erasure. And what's the alternative? Ela asked softly. They both looked at her. She hadn't realized until that moment that the decision, somehow, had fallen to her. She thought of her sister on Tau Cygni. Breathing quiet air under new suns. She thought of the drowned coasts of Earth. The families huddled on towers of glass. The children drawing whales, teaching ships to sing. She thought of the Chilari, who had buried their fleet not to conquer, but to give anyone a chance to carry forward what they could not. Refusing doesn't save us, she said finally. It just means we'll be the next ruins someone finds. 5. The signal. The jury rigged the recorder into the Pelagia's aging antenna ray. Not digital, not vulnerable, pure analog breath. Naveen loaded the tape with the chords the Chilari had carved into their hull. Rakish set his jaw and muttered prayers in languages no machine could parse. Ela pressed the switch. The signal climbed the mast, leapt skyward in crackling harmonics, and vanished into the waiting net of ships. 4. A heartbeat, nothing. Then the fleet answered. One by one, a million vessels lit with pale fire. Their hulls shimmered as though ocean water still dripped from them, scattering light into impossible rainbows. The hum became a chorus, layered and immense, wrapping the earth in resonance. Every human, every alien within reach of the net heard the words. So it begins. 6. The first shadow in the days that followed. The galaxy convulsed. Colonies abandoned their feuds and sent envoys. Draxian warships bent the knee in silence. Even the most cynical governments admitted the darkness was real after the first deep space. Outpost vanished mid-transmission, its final image a smear of stars dissolving into black. The Chalari fleet moved outward, a halo expanding, drawing a line humanity had never dared to draw. Here the light stands. Elo watched from the deck of the Pelagia, salt spray on her face, as the million ships lit the night like a second Milky Way. She knew she had chained her people to an ancient war. She also knew there had never really been a choice. 7. The decision's weight. Naven leaned on the rail, staring at the glowing horizon. Do you think we'll win? Rakish barked a laugh. Kid, wars like this aren't about winning. They're about who's left to tell the story. Ela said nothing. She felt the hum in her bones. Patient and inexorable, the Chalari had hidden their strength in Earth's womb, waiting for the day when survival required unity. That day had come. She whispered to herself, to the sea, to the fleet above, then let us be left, and the ocean, ancient witness to secrets and wars older. Then humanity kept its silence,